administration, joins us now live from Washington. Hilary Mann, Leverett, what's your reaction to the events that we're seeing?
Well, I served at the U.S. Embassy in Cairo twice, but I was also a student in Cairo, Egypt. So for me personally, this is a tremendously significant, monumental day to see my friends and colleagues gaining their freedom for the first time in a very, very, very long time. As someone, though, who watches, analyzes U.S. policy, this is also a day, I think, for some real concern for people in the region. The U.S. has not supported democratization in Egypt or really any other country in the Middle East because U.S. policymakers would not like the outcome of democratic processes. Policies by governments that are freely elected by the people would not support, let alone enforce U.S. policies that are unpopular, whether that's the siege of Gaza, whether that's the invasions and occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan. The people in Egypt are not going to continue to support, let alone enforce, these very, very unpopular policies.
So where does this leave your president, Barack Obama, with this tricky conundrum, how to deal with it?
You know, it's really ironic. Today, Friday, February 11th, today is 32 years to the day, February 11th, from the establishment of the Islamic Republic of Iran that led to the unseating of President Carter here in the United States. I think we need to really look at what President Obama has done, what he is responsible for on his watch, and how he's going to possibly pull it together to respond to this in a constructive way. He has a real serious substantive problem. If he continues to pursue U.S. policies as he has, he is going to be at odds with the people on the ground, not only in Egypt, but I think throughout the Middle East.
Well, we have to say, of course, that this was a revolution of the people of Egypt. It had very little, if anything, to do with the United States, and Barack Obama's involvement was really neither here nor there, was it?
Well, I think that Barack Obama and Vice President Biden and Secretary Clinton were on the phone as much as they possibly could with Omar Suleiman, trying to orchestrate his takeover after they realized that Mubarak wasn't going to be able to carry on. They wanted to have Omar Suleiman, the CIA's point man in Egypt, the person responsible for the rendition program that brought Egyptians home to be tortured. They did everything they could to orchestrate his continued rule over Egypt. The idea that they were just sitting idly on the sidelines, I think, does not comport with the record.
All right, Hilary Mann, Leverett, appreciate your perspective on this. That's one perspective. There are, of course, a great deal more besides, but we appreciate that. Thanks very much indeed. But let's stay with the United States. We can get some more reaction from there. We can speak to Hilary Mann Leverett, who served as a special assistant to the ambassador at the U.S. Embassy in Cairo during the Clinton administration. Joins us now from Washington. Hilary, what might be prudent at this point is just to explain why Egypt is so important to the United States. Why is that?
Well, Egypt really is the center of gravity for the entire U.S. strategy in the Middle East. It is the center of gravity for the Arab-Israeli peace process, which essentially has been the way the United States reconciles its interests in Israel and its interests in the Arab states, is by having an Arab-Israeli peace process. Egypt has been the center of gravity for that. Egypt has been a critical ally for the United States in our so-called war on terror, which has included this rendition program of sending Egyptians back to Egypt to be interrogated with enhanced interrogation techniques. Egypt has been a critical enabler of the U.S. invasions and occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan. And of course, Egypt has been an enabler of the blockade of Gaza. Egypt really is the centerpiece for what has been U.S. strategy during the Obama administration and under the administration of his predecessors.
So given that the policy is really one of better the devil you know, I guess, in the case of Egypt, and given what's just happened, is this a good situation for the United States or a bad situation?
Well, I think it is a good situation for the American people. It certainly puts the American administration, President Obama, in a very difficult dilemma. He has to now deal with the fact that he will be dealing with a government, however this turns out, that is going to have to reflect more the will of the people. And the will of the people in Egypt is not to support the blockade of Gaza, is not to support unending occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan, is not potentially to support the bombing of Iran. That's not what the will of the people are going to reflect in their government, however it turns out. So the challenge for President Obama is going to have to be to recalibrate, to redesign how we pursue U.S. interests so they are not so antagonistic and so much at odds with people who live there.
So yeah, the regional implications are enormous, aren't they? And may just be extremely beneficial, mightn't they? If played right.
Well, if played right, that is the absolute key. We have to somehow come to terms with the fact that people in the Middle East, on the ground where they live, have real interests, they have real grievances that often involve the United States and Israel, and we have to come to terms with that and be able to have a strategy that reflects the real needs, desires, and grievances of the people who are there. I think if we can do that, we will be, once again, a successful, important power. I think one of the reasons you've seen the decline of America's power and standing in the world in the past 10 years has been because our strategies have been so much at odds with the people in the Middle East. If we could change that, I think we could really regain a stature and credibility for U.S. policy that has been sorely missing.
All right, and given the U.S. support of Israel, the problems there are fairly clear, but perhaps spell them out for us and the difficulties that's going to present any administration that was in power, especially given the strength of the Israeli lobby in Washington.
You know, if the U.S. were able to focus on looking at and trying to protect the safety and the security of the Jewish people in at least part of the historic Jewish homeland, that would be one thing. But what U.S. policy has done for more than the past 20 years has been to support a very assertive Israeli national security strategy, which has been to unilaterally use force whenever, wherever, and in whatever amount the Israeli government thought was desirable. The idea that that strategy, Israel's national security strategy, would at all be acceptable to its neighbors was really a fantasy. But American administration after American administration has supported that. Now, it doesn't mean that the United States or even the new Egyptian government is going to jettison long-standing interests in Israel, but we have to calibrate it to the safety and security of the state living in a region where it lives, with neighbors who are actually there, who they are, what they represent, what their history, religion, and traditions are, not some idea of what, you know, some Americans would like it to be.
Yeah, interesting. Hilary Mann, Leverett, we appreciate that perspective. Thanks a lot.